Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here for today's announcement. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people. And we acknowledge that Manitoba is located in the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit, and our government respects the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed in working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. I also believe that it's very important to acknowledge the lands, not only to give credence to the treaties that were signed on this territory, but also as an invitation to collaboration and reconciliation, because we know it is a daily journey. We ask the day, what can we do to advance reconciliation? And I believe that the announcement that we're here today to make will certainly go towards advancing reconciliation. So my name is Rochelle Squires, and I am the Minister of Families and Gender Equity. And I'm pleased to be here, joined with my colleague, the Minister of Justice, Kelvin Goertzen. Also with us is Inspector Eric Luke from Winnipeg Police Services, who we'll be hearing from in a moment, and Misty Bosquet, the Director of Victim Services. Thank you for joining us today. So we're here today to combat intimate partner violence and deal with its aftermath, and perhaps even prevent it altogether with the right interventions. In Winnipeg alone, the team you're about to learn more about responds to approximately 12,000 non-criminal domestic incidents each and every year. So to make this morning's announcement, I would like to invite my colleague, Minister Goertzen, to the podium.
Thank you, Minister Squires. It's always a pleasure to be here with my longtime colleague and friend, Minister Squires, along with the Winnipeg Police Service. And I always begin by noting and mentioning the incredible work that all of our women and men in law enforcement do each and every day to protect our communities and for the benefit of the safety of the residents that they are tasked with protecting. Also want to thank all of those who work at Victim Services represented here today as well. That's a difficult job. It itself takes on a degree of trauma. And when talking to those who are working in Victim Services, we appreciate that they're not just doing a job, they're doing something that they're really led with by their heart, and we're grateful for them. As my colleague mentioned, intimate partner violence is not only prevalent and pervasive in many ways to a degree that we are concerned about in Winnipeg and Manitoba, but it often happens in the privacy of homes, in places where we're not always privy to, and we learn about later. That's why preventing this particular kind of violence and its aftermath is very, very important. Today, we're speaking about the partnership between Manitoba Justice and the Winnipeg Police Services domestic event assessment and screening pilot project. Over the past 2 years, the Manitoba government and the Winnipeg Police Service have been piloting this new approach to better support families experiencing intimate partner violence. We've integrated 3 specialized staff from the Provincial Victim Services branch to be co-located right here at Winnipeg Police Service headquarters to provide a faster and a more coordinated response. Since the onset of this pilot project, the team has reported that the collaboration continues to see promising success and reducing delayed responses to callers who are reaching out to WPS and looking for support surrounding domestic violence incidents that do not relate to charges or arrests. The goal of the team is to connect families calling for support to WPS and to determine the most appropriate outreach collaboratively as a means to not only provide support, but hopefully prevent future incidences from happening. Prior to the implementation of this pilot a couple of years ago, a police unit was often deployed and callers may not have been referred to victim services for several days. Those are several days where not only can disturbing things happen, but support is not provided in an immediate way. Under this new pilot that was launched 2 years ago, callers are now receiving a meaningful response, generally within a few hours of contact. Our government remains committed to ensuring that public safety is a continuum, and that is why today we are announcing that this pilot is becoming a permanent project and a permanent partnership between the Winnipeg Police Service and the Government of Manitoba. Pilot projects are often launched to see if they're effective and to see if the partnership works. Sometimes we don't report back well on the success of those projects. Today, I'm pleased to say that the partnership between the Winnipeg Police Service, Victim Services, and the Government of Manitoba has proven to be successful. But success, as my colleague, Minister of Family, says, is ultimately going to be measured in how do we reduce the number of domestic violence incidents? How do we reduce those who are at harm for domestic violence? This is a part of that. There are obviously other things that need to be done. But I want to commend the Winnipeg Police Service, Victim Services for this partnership, for demonstrating that it works, for demonstrating that it's important. And I'm pleased that it's becoming a permanent element of crime reduction in the province of Manitoba. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Goertzen, for establishing this program, and thanks to Winnipeg Police Service and Victim Services for everything they do to intervene and prevent intimate partner violence. We know that intimate partner violence has been exacerbated over the last few years, and we know that it was a sad reality that when we went into the pandemic, that we were all given the instructions to abide by to stay at home. And we came up with this phrase, safe at home. And for many people, we know that home was not a safe place. And domestic violence, intimate partner violence was certainly on the rise. Since then, our government has more than doubled the funding for the shelters in the province of Manitoba. We took them from $6 million to $15 million. We've also created the Manitoba framework to address gender-based violence, to guide the integration of services, which has helped to realize a key activity to supporting victims of intimate partner violence through multidisciplinary teams providing support, intervention, and prevention. So now I would like to invite Inspector Eric Luke from Winnipeg Police Services to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Just give me a minute here. I'll be reiterating some of the things that Minister Goertzen said, but today I'd like to say that I'm pleased to announce this important initiative that we believe will significantly impact addressing domestic violence in our community. As we all know, domestic violence is a serious issue affecting individuals and families across all of our communities. Often people are at a loss. They don't want the relationship to end. They just need the abuse to stop. And our duty as a responsible government and police service is to provide those necessary supports where we can. The existing system prior to DVSS was commendable, but required enhancements to ensure a coordinated and effective wraparound response to this long-standing problem. The goals and objectives of the project were, number one, to enhance victim safety and reduce the risk of harm to survivors and victims of intimate partner violence, improve coordination and collaboration among the service providers, providing an actual, genuine, multidisciplinary response, and to streamline services to ensure victims and individuals dealing with domestic concerns or intimate partner violence receive the services they want when they need those responses. The project consisted of several key components. It focused on prevention by providing support and intervention to before individuals become victims of violence. This project allowed individuals involved in these complex domestic-related situations to get advice, guidance, and direction on the services required to support them and their families through these complicated situations. We screened calls, as Minister Goertzen stated, that were queued for dispatch, and we attempted to divert the calls out of the queue where people only need advice and direction. To note, General Patrol members were still dispatched to calls where victim safety was an immediate risk, but these diverted callers have been afforded the opportunity to speak with both a police officer and victim services workers during that same call. The callers provided timely access to resources and supports at the time, as opposed to receiving referrals that can take significantly more time. This integrated multidisciplinary response utilizes a best practice model, providing people with what they need when they need it most to reduce the likelihood of escalation. DVSS has, had and will continue to have several significant benefits for our community, including quicker response times, as was stated, and improved support for survivors, increased access to resources and services, and enhanced collaboration among service providers. The WPS has further integrated specialized domestic violence investigators from across the city into DVSX to expand on the wraparound services victims of intimate partner violence need and desire. This has increased the WPS's capacity to provide a trauma-informed approach to these survivors and their families. In conclusion, I want to emphasize the province's victim services and the WPS's unwavering commitment to addressing intimate partner violence in our community. The DVSS represents a significant step forward in our efforts to provide better support for individuals struggling in domestic relationships, allowing the appropriate resources to be deployed, preventing violence escalation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Inspector Luke, for your leadership in this area, for supporting those involved in intimate partner violence, and for meeting people where they're at and understanding that it is a very complex situation and requires a unique and equally complex method of response. So thank you for everything that you do. Now I would like to invite Misty Bousquet from the Department of Victim Services, the Director of Victim Services, to the podium to say a few words.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. I don't want to say too much that's already been said, so I just want to reiterate that Victim Services had a conversation with Winnipeg Police for many years about how we could potentially do things differently, and that's where this idea came from, and it has been quite successful. Our big goals were to really improve how we responded to non-criminal domestic events through early intervention. Prior to this, as stated, there were several days delays, and Victim Services could be a couple more delays once we received the referral. But since our implementation, we've been able to have big wins, which are the reduction of wait periods for individuals, improved response times, and a better utilization of our staff. And then our victims are able to get a meaningful response. The pilot team improves the service delivery by breaking down siloed responses and integrates a collaborative approach, which includes both of our Winnipeg police officers and the Victim Services workers. Callers are receiving information in tandem, which is best practice. As already said, domestic violence calls are the highest received by Victim Services, and this is a much needed alternative response to meet those needs. So we are thankful for this approach. Thank you. Yes, Misty, M-I-S-T-Y, Bousquet, B-O-U-S-Q-U-E-T.
Thank you, Misty, and thanks to everyone in your team for your diligence and your support, and once again, meeting people where they're at, helping families going through a very difficult and traumatic time. So thank you for everything. This concludes the formal portion of today's press announcement, but all of the speakers are available for questions if the media has any.
So I'm going to give you just a general overview. Victim Services offers supports to victims of serious crimes under the Victim Bill of Rights. We also assess individuals for what type of resources they may need, referrals that they would need, so we would connect them to those resources. A lot of the calls that we're receiving are really informational based, and so it's really individual to that call. It could be women's shelters, it could be therapeutic services. Within our own department, we have the compensation program, so if people are eligible for that, that would be a referral that we would make for them. So it's really dependent upon that. But I would invite you to maybe view our website, which would give you details of all of our resources. We still continue to receive about the 11 to 12,000 calls, and so all of those are responded by our regular domestic violence unit. However, annually, I believe it's just under 700 calls go through the pilot project. We'll get a referral from Winnipeg Police for the 11 to 12,000. However, about 700 are put to the pilot project.
Minister, is this program a reallocation of existing staff to the new area?
Yeah, it's continuing on. So it started as a pilot, and there wasn't certainty whether or not it would continue. Pilots are often evaluated, and then a determination is made. This is one where it was successful, and there was a desire to continue on. There might be times in the future we look at expanding it even beyond this, but I think this is, and I think it also speaks to a different way of doing policing more generally. I'm really encouraged to see Winnipeg Police Service, RCMP, other municipal law enforcement agencies who want to partner with each other, with the province, whether that's through integration of certain units, and we've announced some of those, or whether it's embedding victim services within the WPS in this particular incident. I think it's really, really important that collaboration is happening for there were years when people would complain about sort of silos at times between government or between police agencies and government, or between police agencies and themselves. And I think some of those silos are being broken down. And I think that's going to yield a lot of results. Yeah. I have to go back to see when the pilot was created. I believe that individuals came over, right, from victim services, and they're embedded here. Yeah. They don't require new funding, but it's not funding that's going to lapse either now, so it's permanent. Yeah.
You say this pilot is a success. Yeah. And obviously, sort of what happens. Would that have been the factor that determined that this is a success? Because we're still getting the same number of messages.
So I think that it's a couple of things, Ian. Part of it is raw numbers for sure, but raw numbers don't always tell the story behind what we're hearing from those who are on those calls to victim services. So if there's not a charge laid, and there's not a unit that's going out to a particular area, obviously somebody is called because they're concerned, they're worried, they maybe have just questions about what they can or can't do. And when there's a proactive intervention on that can reduce things in the future. Hard to know, of course. Sometimes you can't measure what you prevented, and that's sort of the challenge sometimes. So we're often looking at what the experience is from victim services directly, and what they're hearing, and then they'll have interaction with individuals they've helped too, to get a feeling of how was that helpful. And then, of course, police will indicate to us. It's helpful to move people out of a certain queue, because it allows them to respond to other things as well that they might have been tied up doing had they been responding to the things that weren't removed from the queue.
Is there a desire to not send police as often to
I think there's a desire not to send police to the wrong place, right? So our police are busy Nobody's going to dispute that Winnipeg Police Service, RCMP, the various municipal forces around Manitoba, they're busier than they've ever been. Part of that is because we've seen an increase in crime, violent crime in particular. You've reported on that, everybody's reported on that, and we've taken steps to try to address some of that. Part of that is because what police are asked to do is changed in the last 15 or 20 years. So the ability to divert some of those calls where it isn't necessary for a police officer or a unit to respond and allow somebody else to provide that service allows police then to deal with things that they should be responding to. So it's really about trying to make sure that people get appropriate services and police are able to respond to the things they appropriately have to respond to. I'm here all day if you want. You're good? Okay.